In the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the second month, he began to build the house of the Lord. So begins our story of the Temple Mount, the hill on which the first temple, often referred to as Solomon's Temple, was built by the Jewish king Solomon. There are estimates that the temple was built in the 10th century BC. However, it's worth noting that there's considerable debate as to the date, whether the first temple is located on the Temple Mount, or if it ever existed at all. Due to the considerable religious and political tension between Judaism and Islam, it would seem unlikely that any archaeological excavation of the Temple Mount to answer these questions will take place in the near future. The first temple famously housed in its innermost sanctuary the Ark of the Covenant, which was the chest containing the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments famously delivered to Moses from God. He built 20 cubits of the rear of the house with boards of cedar from the floor to the walls, and he built this within as an inner sanctuary, as the most holy place. The first temple's design and function was vastly different from our present appreciation of the modern synagogue, church, or mosque. Whereas in a modern Catholic church, one might be free to roam the building with no restricted holiest of holy sites, access to the inner sanctum of the first temple was likely either prohibited or at least severely limited to the general public. Although this idea may seem strange to the modern audience, this was widely the case across many different cultures in antiquity. One need only look at Greco-Roman temples, which similarly had an inner cella restricted to the general public, which housed the cultic statue of whatever particular god the temple was dedicated to. Like Greco-Roman temples, the Jewish temple participated in animal sacrifice at an altar outside of the building. Moses said to Aaron, "Come to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and the people. Sacrifice the offering that is for the people, and make atonement for them, as the Lord has commanded." So Aaron came to the altar and slaughtered the calf as a sin offering for himself. The term burnt offering in this passage typically references the burning of the entire animal or portions of the animal until nothing but ashes remained. In reality, however, given how rare and expensive meat was in the diet, large portions of the animal were likely saved for either the attendant priests or for the individual who brought the animal for sacrifice. In 587 BC, the first temple built by Solomon was destroyed during the sack of Jerusalem by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. This marked the beginning of the Babylonian exile, as an estimated quarter of the Jewish population was taken into captivity in far-off Babylon. To say that this war was devastating would be an understatement, with the population of the Kingdom of Judea, by some scholarly estimates, decreasing to 10% of its pre-war population. In 539 BC, the Babylonians were defeated by the Persians, led by their king Cyrus the Great. That year, Cyrus the Great allowed the return of the Babylonian Jewish exiles back to Jerusalem. The return of the Babylonian exiles and the relative stability of Persian rule reinvigorated the Jewish populace, and in 516 BC, construction of a second temple began on the Temple Mount, albeit without the Ark of the Covenant, which had been lost to time. Just as the first temple is often referred to as Solomon's Temple, the second temple is sometimes referred to as Herod's Temple in reference to the Jewish king Herod the Great, who undertook significant refurbishment of the temple in the 1st century BC. Herod also built a number of retaining walls to allow for expansion of the Temple Mount complex. Although the Temple Mount originally referenced a hill that lay north of the historical heart of early Jerusalem, sometimes referred to as the City of David, one can easily see that centuries of construction have completely removed any outlines of this hill. As the saying goes, history often repeats itself, and in 70 AD, the Second Temple suffered a similar fate as the First Temple. Under Roman general and future Emperor Titus, Jerusalem and the Second Temple were destroyed during the First Jewish-Roman War. The destruction of the city is described here by the 1st century historian Flavius Josephus. Now, as soon as the army had no more people to slay or to plunder, because there remained none to be the objects of their fury, for they would not have spared any had there remained any other work to be done, Caesar gave orders that they should now demolish the entire city and temple. The sack of Jerusalem, memorialized here on the Arch of Titus in Rome, signaled the end of any hope for an independent Jewish state in antiquity, and with it the construction of any replacement temple on the Temple Mount. Early Arab conquest of Jerusalem in 637 AD resulted in the construction of the Dome of the Rock, the world's oldest surviving work of Islamic architecture, and a symbol of much of the present geopolitical and religious strife between Judaism and Islam. The Dome of the Rock is a shrine said to house the foundation stone, or noble rock, where creation of the world began in both the Islamic and Jewish faiths. Unfortunately, it is also believed to be the site of the Jewish first and second temple, and therefore sacred ground. It is important to note that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all Abrahamic religions in reference to the figure of Abraham. Whether viewed as a founding father of Judaism, the spiritual progenitor of all Christians, or part of a long line of prophets culminating in Muhammad, all three of these religions view him as part of their individual histories. So, it should be no surprise that both Islam and Judaism should view the foundation stone of great importance. This is reflected in a passage from the Quran stating that Muhammad traveled on a burak, a sort of winged horse, in 621 AD to the Temple Mount, where he meets other prophets such as Abraham, Moses, and Jesus before ascending to heaven to speak with God. The Dome of the Rock, as well as the adjacent Al-Aqsa Mosque, form the compound commonly referred to as Al-Aqsa, rather than the Temple Mount, which directly references the Jewish temples. It should immediately be apparent how the historical significance of the Temple Mount to both Judaism and Islam have placed them at odds with one another. Presently, worship by Jews is confined to the base of the Western Wall. Portions of this Western Wall date from the time of King Herod and his construction of the retaining walls to expand the Temple Mount. This wall represents the holiest place where Jews are permitted to pray, as they are not allowed to do so on the Temple Mount platform, in part due to political considerations as well as strictly religious concerns. Since the exact location of the first and second temples are not known, even ascending the Temple Mount should be avoided because of ritual impurity. Unlike other historical sites or archaeological ruins, the Temple Mount's history still feels unfinished. One can't help but feel that the Temple Mount will continue to play a critical role in world events for many decades to come. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my other videos on Masada and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.